Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, live on YouTube. My name's David, and holy misogyny complex Batman, it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, dearie me, what have we done? My name's Sam, and fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory. We'll get that by podcasting, right?
More than we will saving, quote-unquote, native Indian peoples from other native Indian peoples.
Yeah.
Let's get into this gross movie.
So can I start? Because we're doing Temple of Doom, and I saw it on Disney Plus. It came up and said, brilliant, we're doing, we've got Indiana Jones now. And so I thought, excellent. Like, I've seen Raiders relatively recently. I watch Last Crusade like at least 3 or 4 times a year because it's my favourite. And so I thought, let's just do Temple. That'll be fun. That'll be a laugh. I haven't watched this in like 15 years. It's going to be... Oh, no. Oh, God, I've forgotten how racist it is. Oh, God, I've forgotten how misogynistic it is. Oh, I've forgotten how, sometimes it's just kind of boring, and it's just so dark and everything's... I mean, there's literal child slaves in this movie. So I want to apologise.
It's not even the most problematic or upsetting thing in this movie.
No, I want to apologise mostly to you, Dave, because I feel like you've had an experience with this movie.
We say a lot like this is a movie where I'm just looking at my phone, whole minutes have gone by, and I'm not watching, and it's just like. I got a pizza for tea earlier, and I was like, Ross jokes about this all the time. Like, just leave the movie running when I went to pick it up. Like, maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'll just leave the movie running, and then I'll save myself 10 minutes. Maybe I'll go and have a cup of tea, or I'll go to the toilet. I'll just leave it running. It's fine. I'm not missing anything. It's okay.
Yeah, I know.
And that's never a good sign. I did, however, use the time when I wasn't watching this movie, while it was on, to come up with a list of alternative and more accurate titles.
So these are off the cutting room floor. These are the ones that they were gonna go with, but eventually settle on Temple of Doom. Okay. Right,
yeah. So
I'm ready.
It's the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Divorced Guys Who Hate Women. That's a strong contender.
Right, hold on, 2 seconds.
Indiana Jones.
Can you do it in the voice of a 1930s announcer? Is that possible? Indiana Jones.
No, I don't have the energy. This movie has sapped me of my 1920s commentator voice.
Okay. Right.
It's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Racist Caricatures. It's Indiana Jones and the Temple of our hero desperately grabbing at Kate Capshaw's tits. It's Indiana Jones and the Temple of dead friend? What dead friend? I never had a friend who died.
Oh yeah,
it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of White Saviors. Lots of them.
Oh.
And it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of unlimited aeroplane fuel that defied logic and reality.
I mean, that last one is particularly egregious. Of all the things, of all the things you've listed, the aeroplane fuel.
What's happened is your aeronautic nerdery has kind of like infected me. So a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, every time I've watched this movie, it's never really occurred to me that geography's all right. I know vaguely that Shanghai is on the east coast of China. China's a pretty big country. This movie takes place in like modern day Bangladesh, what was then North British India.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, that's like, I don't know, a couple of 1,000 miles. And then this plane apparently flies that all in one go, or they stop to refuel. I worked it out, by the way. I did the maths.
I know you did. I'm so proud of you.
I don't have the plane name in front of me, but this plane does about 580 miles to a tank of fuel, or did in 1930s when this came out. When this was set, when this came out.
It feels like
it would have had to refuel 5 or 6 times to get from Shanghai to where there's still fuel in the tank because they vent it all out of the plane, where they crash land in the Himalayas, more or less. Well, it looks like the Himalayas, but again, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's
more egregious than the fucking raft, Sam.
Don't. Let's not. All right. what I love about this film is that it has completely broken you in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. Because usually it's Ross who comes on with the pedant cast immediately after 5 minutes. I mean, everyone's tuned out at this point because they're like, well, these guys they're not even talking about the big issues of this movie. No, we are
It's all
going to
just
get into the
1930s
minutia.
plane nerds. Like, oh yeah, tell us about it. Tell us about the plane. Tell
More,
us how many
more.
miles it gets to the gallon.
So I think it is outrageous. That's very outrageous. Equally outrageous are all the other things that you referenced in your your made up titles, because this is like one of those movies that I honestly genuinely had a better memory of this because I haven't seen this in a long time. Because generally I avoid it because it's not, it's just not
Oh,
as fun. If I'm going to
Sam, my
watch it in,
sweet summer child.
I know
This is a proper innocence movie. If you watch this as a kid,
which I did so many times.
right, you don't know about misogyny. You don't know about systemic colonial racism.
Being a child slave looks kind of fun. Like, hey, that's a laugh.
Exactly.
Like,
Oh, they're digging in a mine. That'd be a
in a
laugh.
cave? Cool.
Although,
Mine
sidebar,
carts.
I went down an actual mine, like an old mine, when I was a kid, and it's haunted me to this very day.
Yeah.
So maybe not for me. Maybe I didn't think the slavery.
You
was
did grow up in Yorkshire, so I assumed that was just like school for you. Is that right? Pretty much, just yeah, that's what you had to do. It shows in your illiteracy anyway. So so when I again I thought, well, what's Temple doing? That's going to be fine.
of all the Indiana Jones movies.
Because I've seen them. This is the one I haven't seen in so many years, and I thought that maybe there was something there, But, dear listener, I felt fully vindicated in this decision for the first 13 minutes. Like, I was like, because Dave's been texting me fucking 24 hours moaning about this. I'm like, come on. And then in the first 13 minutes, I am just loving it. I'm loving
I wish you wouldn't.
anything goes.
I wish you wouldn't portray me like that, Sam. I quite often effusively text you in the middle of the night about movies I love. This just didn't happen to be one of them.
I know, that's fine. No. I don't know. Because what you got to remember is this is Sam in pre 13 minutes, right? After this point, it all gets terrible. It all gets terrible, and I'm right there with you in the absolute just misery of the rest of this movie. But the first 13 minutes of this movie is rip roaring. It's an absolute classic. It's just amazing fun. Like, anything goes. The fight with the balloons and the ice everywhere, and like the machine gun with the big symbol thing, into the street chase, short rounds driving the car. It's great. On the plane, Lao She, shipping, Dan Aykroyd. Like, I am so invested in this point. I'm so excited.
Credits roll. That was a great 13 minutes of Indiana Jones. Fantastic.
Well, that's what you said. Isn't it?
It's
turn it off.
It's almost the biggest turn off and flaw of this whole movie is that. So I've been doing a bit of reading about the movies in general, because I also watched quite a lot of Raiders last night, rather than watching the end of this movie. And so George Lucas and Steven Spielberg have got a lot to answer for, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But when they wrote Raiders, basically they had loads of ideas for set pieces. They had the idea for all the fight scenes and all the stunts and all of like the action. They had ideas for, but they didn't really have like a plot to tie it all together. So they hired Lawrence Kasdan, who later wrote Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
Or before he wrote Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
they hired him to basically like fill in the gaps, the plot gaps, and like write a movie. And home run, what a movie! What a tight, like, good screenplay. And this movie feels like they did the same thing, except they then didn't hire Lawrence Kasdan because he didn't want to do it.
No,
and so they hired somebody else who just.
Well, it's written by George Lucas, story by George Lucas, and I think there's like
that's the same. I think the same as Raiders, where he had a basic idea for it, and then it was adapted into a screenplay by somebody else.
By someone else, yeah.
I think that Kasdan is obviously premier screenwriter in the 80s, especially, and like these guys didn't do as great a job, or maybe they couldn't stand up to Lucas as much, and maybe remove some of the more um, offensive elements, or maybe kind of like
Yeah.
tried and crowbar. Because that's the biggest issue with this movie, aside from the misogyny and the racism, which again, that's going to be the bulk of this podcast.
Oh,
But let's save it.
chapter 2 incoming. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest flaw of this movie is that there's no reason anyone's doing the things that they're doing. I don't really care. I don't know why Indy was in China. That seems interesting though. They're there, they're solving this mystery, except there's almost no mystery to solve. There's almost no archaeology going on. We don't get any speeches about the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword. Nothing like that. There's no mystery here.
Well,
It's just this horror movie that takes place in this like haunted mine,
it
basically.
is. It is a horror movie. I'm reminded of Ross's very funny bit. I can't remember what episode it was, but it's basically so Indy's in China. Oh yeah, and there's a diamond. Oh wow, that sounds cool. But forget about all that.
Forget about that.
So
Forget about that.
Indy's in India. Oh, okay, interesting. And there's loads of kids missing, right? And like it just goes on and on like this, and then there's like, and it, and you're never really, I think, brought back from the heights of the first 13 minutes because the actual plotting of this is pretty poor. Like they're in India and they managed to get like lost or whatever. Or they're looking for they're looking for this, what they call it, Shangri-La or whatever the thing is, and like there's not any drivers for the character. There's not an
The good
impetus.
guys and the bad guys are simultaneously not really after anything.
No one's
They're
after
there,
anything.
but they're sort of there. The bad guys, and they're like, "Oh, this indie guy's here.
They want a
Let's
bunch
kill
of
him."
stones.
And then we kind of fall into the plot from there. But there's no maneuvering. It's not much of a road movie, which the other two movies, the good ones,
Oh,
are absolute road movies. We are moving
wonderful.
around. We're meeting different characters. We're doing different things. Time, passes in between us doing these things.
yeah. And what's
So it
the
makes this
common?
film seem quite stodgy, and just honestly, it just give me a villain with a bit of pathos. Give me a villain give me a villain speech. Let me understand why this guy's trying to do what he's doing, other than like he rips people's hearts out, and that's really scary. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's true, but why? Why is he ripping people's hearts out? What's his
Yeah.
end goal here?
Well,
Yes,
they
he's
do
got
talk.
his child slave man. He's got his Willy Wonka factory, but they produce dirt, not chocolate, right? But what's the end goal? What is the ultimate aim of this guy other than to have this gang and murder people for fun, seemingly?
Yeah,
I
they
don't
do
think they
talk
nail
about.
the magic stones
No.
enough. There's not enough mythology. There's not enough of archaeology, made up archaeology. There's
Well,
just
hold on, because you're
something
jumping
missing.
around. I know you're excited. I know you're angry, but you're jumping around it because. So what do the Thuggy clan want, right? Because this is a real thing, but really they're just thieves. Like
The
they're
word
not-
thuggy is real, yes.
yeah, and that comes from we obviously get the word thug from that, which is cool, but nothing to do with this movie. And like there is a line where they say, "Oh, we want to take over India" or something to that effect, but we're never shown that. We're also, I think, the biggest problem with the whole baddie thing is that we need like a figurehead. I think that having the Sultan be a child is a huge error because it basically means that he could have been part of the he could have been the figurehead of evil with the violent guy, the Kalimar dude, his henchman, and that's always a good dynamic, isn't it? Where you've got the overlord who's got this grand plan, this vision. Dr. Jones, I will take over India and I'll do it with these stones, just like we see in the other movies. And we could have the psychopath who's the enforcer going around doing all the nasty shit. And it's like, so straight away, there's just all these little story beats that I think that someone like, as you say, Kasdan would have been able to pick up and say, it doesn't really work. Like the only reason that Indy's doing this is because he feels sorry for these people, these wretched people in the village, as the movie just displays them, just absolute like, and obviously India not a particularly full of poverty and all that, so it's not to say that
Especially
there
when the
isn't-
British were in charge.
yes, but because we don't humanize them, because they are literally dehumanized. Like they are made to be like this horde of zombies basically surrounding them. These white saviors. Like it's just you don't connect to it. You don't connect to the village really. And I think that's a big problem. So then, why is anyone doing anything that they want to do? The bad guys don't have a point, and neither do the good guys. That's a big problem, isn't it? Especially after 13 minutes of fun.
It's like I said, it's the biggest flaw in that there's loads of action and generally it looks pretty good. All of the stunts are pretty good, but there's kind of not a lot in between it. Can we talk about let's talk about the first 13 minutes just in a bit more detail, because that's the most irritating part of the movie, because it's kind of like after that the wheels are off and we don't really care, but in that moment it's like it's Indiana Jones and he's having a James Bond type adventure and you expect him to start playing Baccarat at any moment. Yeah. And that's really cool. It's like you said, there's a big diamond and they've poisoned him. Oh, this is really exciting. There's a car chase and that I think is maybe sort of part of their making it this episodic sort of serial, and it works really well. And then we're just done with it. Like Lao She doesn't come back as like he finds out Indy isn't dead, and maybe that could be the culmination. Is that Lao She's behind it, but we don't get any of that. I mean, it's just kind of, and we're off, and he's kidnapped this child from China.
Yeah. I suspect it's an attempt to go back to those serials where, like last time on Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, we had, and we would have, sometimes you do get like a kind of snapshot from before, or you start halfway through an adventure, and that can be a useful like tool sometimes. But I mean, we see it in Last Crusade a little bit, don't we, with the flashback to Indy as a kid. So, but that movie uses the prologue as it is to set up the rest of the film, whereas this just abandons it. I mean, the guy whose friend, I'll be having the last adventure, Indy, he says, as he dies in front of us after 4 seconds. He's got 3 lines.
We never heard of him again, and Indiana Jones does not seem bothered.
No one cares about it. They're all just and it's just a weird feel. Even though I think the tone that it sets in terms of anything goes, all that is like it's glittering literally, everything's popping, and I think that also probably contributes to the problem that when you get to India. And when there's all these kids disappearing, and it's like, it's just a heck of a lot more fucking miserable than it was in Shanghai. So
yeah, and I guess part of that is budgetary, and I guess it's George Lucas also. Maybe we're lucky it didn't take place in China, because I can only imagine it would have been more racist somehow.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been better, would it? let's be honest. Yeah.
So let's talk about Kate Capshaw for a minute. Speaking of racism, which we'll get back to because it's the larger part of this movie.
Yeah.
Let's do misogyny.
Misogyny. Welcome to Misogyny Cast.
I feel like they wasted Kate Capshaw in this movie.
Well, am I right in thinking that she gets one punch in this movie? Is that right?
Yeah, she punches Indy
on the minecart.
Oh, yeah, and she punches Indy at one point.
Yeah, punches Indy, but I mean, like, actually, she gets to do something, which is she punches one guy at the end and knocks him off the minecart, and that's after, an hour and 45 minutes. But other than that, I don't think she has, like, anything to do other than to be the butt of the jokes or to be laughed at in some other way in terms of, oh, look, she's hurt herself, or Indy! Or any,
she doesn't have any agency to start with, which is always a problem for women in movies, especially going back to
what's she in control of? Yeah.
Well, literally nothing, because she's working in this nightclub where it's kind of implied that she's on the she's a piece of meat for Lao She.
Yeah.
And then she's used as a literal piece of meat, a bargaining chip, when Indiana Jones threatens to kill her several times. Then apparently the poisoning of Indiana Jones is a bridge too far, and we get the really I paused and rewound this because I was like, I'm sorry, what? that in the car when he's trying to get the antidote from it, he is grabbing Kate Capshaw's tits like a drowning man. It's quite astounding. And it's fun in obviously, like, in the context of the movie it makes sense, but I'm like, you couldn't have shot that in a different way that was just a little bit less rapey. And then he kidnaps this woman and takes her to a different country where she's subjected to all of this torturous stuff, and it's like, why does she have to go with him in the first place?
Yeah. Why does she not just I mean, there's so many points where you think, why is anyone doing anything that they're doing? Because if I was her, you've got someone who speaks English in this village. Let's say you get off the plane before it takes off. Okay, that's fine, but let's pretend
like, that was stupid. You're fired.
Yeah, let's pretend that didn't happen. And we're in India, like, there's someone who speaks English in the village, so you could probably figure out how to get to Delhi. You don't need to go on this adventure with this guy.
But you could even have some agency of it being her that decides that they need to help these people.
I mean, it's
which
just
is tropey and like playing on like gender roles, yes, of her being a woman and therefore more sympathetic. But it's not. And then they go and stay at this castle, and she doesn't really want to go and stay at the castle. She wants to go to Delhi so she can get a flight and get out of India. And then she decides she wants to sleep with Indiana Jones, which I guess I buy because it's a 1984 Harrison Ford. But like,
it doesn't. There's no setup. There's no setup for this. I was actually shocked how quickly they went from bickering and arguing to, oh, you've got a nice dress on, and even still don't like each other. She has a terrible time at dinner, which we'll come to in a second. We'll come to the chilled monkey brains.
We'll come to that because I think that's on the racism.
It is. That's the racism. Hold on though. She has a terrible time at dinner, and then she goes back to her room, and all of a sudden, she's fucking in the heat. Like just going, and it's like, well, where did this come from? We have no attraction between them up until this point, and it's like,
it's very strange. I think their chemistry in these scenes is pretty good, but a lot of that is, again, it's a 1984 Harrison Ford. He's a startlingly attractive man. I'm not sure that's up for debate. It's just a fact, especially was the second half of the movie where he's not wearing his shirt, and I'm like,
I do declare.
Everyone is. And so you can kind of buy it from that point of view, but it comes back to the question of screenwriting of like, what does this character want?
Yeah.
And seemingly all the horrors that have happened, she's kind of forgotten. And then from this moment on, once Harrison Ford gets jumped, again, all agency is gone because she's essentially kidnapped for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. It's
she doesn't even get to steer the minecart.
No, there's no.
The child gets to steer the minecart.
Sure, gets to do. There's no role for her in this movie. There's no like pivotal scene where she gets to unlock some kind of puzzle, or we're not even given any information about her in terms of like what is she good at. Or because
it's the departure from Raiders and the difference between this and Last Crusade. In Raiders, Marion is the very first thing we learn about Marion is she can drink anyone under the table. She's beating people up. She's clever. She's educated. She knows as much as Indy, and she won't put up with his shit. And that's where that character starts off.
Yeah, that's what's so confusing to me is that we go from Marion, who is like one of the best. I think she's. I mean, it's. You could probably, in fact, you could critique it quite readily in terms of it's still not great on the misogyny scale, but at least she's got stuff to do. She's fucking stabbing the French guy, and she's getting pissed, and it's like she has got fire. And we have interesting things and facts that we know about her, and she doesn't like Nazis and all these other things that we can just rhyme off. And with Capshaw's character, I really struggle to think of what she's a singer. She doesn't like getting dirty.
Fortunately, Sam, I have confronted this riddle, and I have some startling, fresh off the presses information about why this character is as she is. And again, No, 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 no. Spinning newspaper thing. Um,
That was
so
terrible.
I think both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were getting divorced when they made this movie.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Like they did that typical thing where they became really successful and immediately divorced their wives for much younger and more attractive women.
Mm.
Um, Men, we're the worst. Um, and it really comes through in this movie that like it's not just that Kate Capshaw's a non-character; she's kind of there to be ridiculed and to be, bad at what she's doing and all of that, and stupid and ineffective, and all she really does is scream. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that is maybe coming from this obviously latent anger that Spielberg and Lucas had towards women at this point because of what was going on in their real lives. I can't see any other way that explains it quite as concisely because this film was written by husband and wife duo. So you've got to think like a woman was involved in writing this movie, and yet it's one of the most misogynistic things I've ever seen.
Yeah. It is. It is. I mean, I think it's particularly shocking, as we say, because of what happens in um, Raiders with Marion, but also going forward, what happens with the
Elsa.
contrast to Elsa and to the last movie, which just in tone, just in feel, is like it's such a lighter movie. It's just the funnest Indiana Jones movie there is. It's my favorite because of that reason. So I think you're right to say that. I mean, I think Lucas has said like because is it Marsha Griffin? I think he was married to who edited Star Wars,
Yeah.
and then they got divorced. Spielberg was going out with split up with his girlfriend, and you know what, you just really wonder about like Hollywood men, you know, and what they're able to achieve and get away with because of their success and their power, and it's galling, really, isn't it? It's galling that these men can make entire movies with catering, with Teamsters, with all of the infrastructure that exists, and they can
Yeah.
basically just use it for their own
I
personal.
know what movie didn't get funded because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg made this hate fest about women and foreigners.
Yeah,
Like basically this like very hateful piece of cinema that's very negative about almost everyone in it.
yeah,
And it's like,
and
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 again, it's so difficult to understand because Last Crusade is so good and because Raiders is so good, the movies on either side of this, and because so many of the other movies these two individuals have made have been so good and so influential that they got this blank check to basically like, yeah, go and make your divorce picture about how women are all stupid and
yeah,
useless and how
go
foreigners are all
go
pathetic
to
and
India. Oh no, India's not letting you film here because they see how offensive your script is. Okay, go to Sri Lanka then, and you can make your horrible movie there. Like it is bizarre. And I think that question of what films didn't get made, and I tell you what films didn't get made: films directed by women, films written by women, films starring and films for women. Like these are the films that we lose because these fucking like toads sitting on on their just completely covering the production money that exists for these type of movies in the 80s. It's very galling, isn't it, actually? It's very upsetting. So oh the we're not going to go long on this because we
can we
are
talk
going to
about the
get
cult? Can we talk about the Kalimar cult? Let's maybe
I'd
like
like
have
yeah
a bit of a palate cleanser. Let's
I'm
talk
going
about
to
some things we liked.
can I defend this movie just for a moment?
No,
Because as
obviously not from what we've just discussed. But you can talk about things you liked in the movie.
okay, so let's pretend there's a different way that we set up that these stones are missing. Let's not have these poor, wretched Indian villagers like part of the plot. Let's just say we land somewhere and the stone is gone, and the stone's important because it keeps everything in balance. There's been more
Well,
earthquakes. There's been
let's
pestilence.
say, here's an idea, Sam. They crash land, they go to the local village, and wouldn't you know it, there's an archaeologist there doing a dig, and he knows Indiana Jones by reputation, and he
Yeah,
says,
an Indian
while you're
archaeologist.
here, say the boat isn't coming, the boat's going to be a week. While you're here, come to the dig, have a look around. I'd really appreciate your input. And then
Yeah.
it's like we can set up the mythology of in Raiders, for instance, you get to CIA guys who come to see Indiana Jones to talk to him about Ravenwood and about what the Nazis are doing in Egypt, and they basically set out the plot of the movie. You could have that scene. It's useful sometimes to set out what the stakes are and what will happen. Because, for instance, in this movie, what will happen largely if Indiana Jones hadn't been involved is the British Army would have appeared at the end, just like they fucking did, and shoot all these bad guys anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good note. I really like it. I think if you make the archaeologist Indian, maybe it's even a woman. Crazy, I know. That would be a good
You could
improvement.
even, Sam, because this is the prequel, you could even have it be the French guy from the last movie.
Oh, wow.
They call him Belloc.
Belloc. But you could also then have like you could still retain some of the darkness, because this is the bit that actually and going into the Kalimar stuff and the you know, the thuggy cult, is I really quite like how dark it is in some senses. The subject matter is scary, and I think that Indiana Jones veers towards that in the other movies. Raiders is a bit dark at the end with the face melting, like, and Last Crusade has its again moment, but really it doesn't really keeps it quite like, you know, it's just the wrath of God.
Raiders is a lot darker than Last Crusade. Again,
Yeah.
having watched it yesterday,
But
there are people dying, people getting shot. There's the Nazis threatening to burn this woman's face off. So some of the tone comes from that.
yeah,
And obviously, I think
the
Last
Nazis,
Crusade, I think, is a departure from that generally, where it's much more fun and much lower stakes.
the Nazis
Not the lower
keep
stakes,
it-
but much more silly.
yeah, and the Nazis keep it light in an odd way, don't they? Because it's the 80s and Nazis are just a thing from the past, not like actual
Because you don't need to show them doing
politicians.
horrible things like pulling people's hearts out, because they're the Nazis. We know
It's
they're
great.
bad guys, so you
The
don't really need to
shortcut.
like set that up.
So I like the darkness, and I want to see more of that. And I think actually you could have then Indy. You could have the moral quandary of like, why is he doing this? Why is he helping these kids that are you know, mates, our local archaeologists it's like, because he says, you know, there might be treasure as well, and he's like, oh, treasure, eh? Well, okay. And we get to see the fact that Indy, this is set before the you know, Raiders, so we get to see the fact that he was a bit more of a, you know, he's a bit more morally ambiguous at the start of his adventuring career, I guess. And then we go on with the movie. So when we get into the Kalimar stuff, you could actually then develop some kind of moral throughput
The Han Solo thing.
for Indy to work through, because when he gets turned into the baddie, when he drinks the blood, which by the way is fucking terrifying, like the whole cup thing, and like, what the shit, this is insane. But when that happens, it's not for any reason. There's no thematic reason for that to happen other than, oh, Indy's a bad guy now, cool, he'll come back, of course he will. Whereas actually what I would love to have explored is like, actually Indiana Jones gets to indulge in his evil side, and we get to see him be a bit more evil for maybe even a little bit longer. But it would at least, but that would maybe create a space for Willie to like snap him out of him, and the fact that she could then be the one who reforms him and says, you're not going to be a scoundrel, you're going to save the day, you know, and she would be the one bringing a bit of moral compass to this. Now again,
Yeah.
yes, it is gendered, obviously, and all that stuff. I'm just working with what we've got, and so I think you could then have the whole Kalimar evil thing, like, actually be a theme in the movie that that would
Are you saying
extend
that it
beyond.
could, like, maybe matter?
Exactly. That we could have something that's not just, oh, evil guys are evil. And
Well, it comes down to the whole movement of we're now in the mine, the haunted mine thing is.
yeah,
It comes down to like a really poorly constructed movie where essentially it means that the first act is the Shanghai bit, which is 13 minutes long. The second act is their brief stay in the hotel, you know, the haunted hotel. And then it's the mines. And it's like, and there's no There's no mid movie lull. There's no all is lost movement at the end of the second act. It's all just one long, exhausting action scene that goes on for way too long. In parts, isn't particularly well shot or scripted. Like when Short Round is like bowling over these Aladdin baddies like Skittles. He is. He's like hitting them with a bit of wood, and they're like falling over backwards, and it's like, what are we doing? The tone is just so all over the place, and Short Round's a big part of that. Obviously, they want to have the kid there because kids are precocious. I mean, it's going to make kids want to go and see the movie. You know, he is cute, he is funny. It's a good like comedic thing for Indy to play off. He cares about kids. That's a bit of a save the cat moment as well for him in the movie.
Yeah,
but
and I think
it then just turns it into like Pee-wee's Adventure, and it's like, well, pick one. We can either have this gritty like murder cult and Indiana Jones nearly dying and murdering, you know, being blood mad or whatever, and then saving all the children at the end, or we can have, you know, the Goonies and kind of pick one. Do you know what I mean? Like choose 100%.
one. And I think Short Round's a great character, I think, and Quan is doing a fantastic job as a kid, like Oscar winner. Let's just make a note of that. You know, 40 years later, which is pretty fucking. That's what a career path that is. He said that he didn't think the portrayal of the character was racist. I'm not going to make judgment on that particularly, but I don't think compared to the rest of the movie that character comes across.
I don't think it's inherently racist. I don't think that Indiana Jones treats
it's a bit
Short Round
tropey, isn't it? With
like a person of color. I think it's more ultimately, and this is maybe not the best, you know, acid test, but like if you recast Short Round as a white kid, does the character change? And the answer is not really. And I don't know whether
the
that's
language, maybe just his like speech or whatever. But anyway, there's lots of people who are better placed to talk about that. But like you're right, all of that works well, and it's light and it's fun, and it's great, and it's like every scene with Short Round in, I'm enjoying because he's having fun, the character, and I think the actor as well, and so then you end up with this great like dynamic. But then all of that, of course, is stolen by the fact that, oh shit, there's a bunch of child slaves over there. What the fuck are they doing? You know what I mean?
It's pretty grim. It's also not well explained. I mean, I don't run a haunted mine. That's not my business. It's not my sector.
Hey, you didn't deny you've not got child slaves though. So I'm going to call you out on that.
I do not now and have never had child slaves. That is illegal and immoral.
When did you stop having child slaves?
I said I do not now, nor have I ever had child slaves. It's going to get bogged down in this. It's going to haunt one of us when we run for political office. But it's kind of like, it seems odd that they're all child slaves because, again, if you were running a labor-intensive business, the only reason to hire child workers is because you can pay them less than you pay adult workers. But if you're not paying them, you may as well have the adults, no? Enslaving people, you may as well have the people that can lift twice as much and do all of that. That's just a bit of a logical inconsistency.
Yeah, it reminds me of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. You know, when they've stolen all the child catcher has stolen all the kids, and they're all living underground under the massive Bavarian castle, and it's like, why? Like, what? Why? Because they find kids annoying? All right, but now they're living under your castle. That's going to be a problem. Like, you got to feed kids. You got to feed them. They're going to make noise. They're going to be like it just, in a light-hearted romp like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang that is 4 hours long, whatever. That's fine.
If it's for the Goonies, it's like, oh, we're going to free all these child slaves. And we're children, so that's therefore what we would care about.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is like, I think by having the slaves be children, I think the idea is to make it be a little bit less impactful than actual slavery.
See, but surely that's worse.
But I don't know. They're cheering and they're running around at the end, and I just think that
Yeah, but they're getting whipped in the meantime.
I
There's
know. I'm not
literally
saying it's
scenes.
good.
There's scenes
I
of
agree.
children
It's
getting.
troubling and a poor decision, and just generally, like, why do you need
I,
it?
I mean, I think we're not
If they're
arguing
all
with
just
each other
like the
here,
idea
but
is that these thuggee are taking locals and sacrificing them, and that is kind of an idea. I'm like, oh, okay. So they've said, can you go and rescue the people that we know? And I'm trying to think. There's another movie that's similar where they go somewhere to rescue their friends, and actually there's loads and loads of people there. Do you know what I'm thinking of? 101 Dalmatians. But it's the same thing, right? Cruella de Vil has all of these puppies so she can make a coat, right? In this movie, they've
is
got all of these people so they can sacrifice them, right? They say, we need you to go and save our Dalmatians. There's 101 of them. They all escape at the end. Fine. Loads in common. I don't know why that just came into my head.
101 child slaves. That's the movie
Exactly.
that we're writing right now.
And then you have them in shackles and they're being whipped and they're mining something. And it's all a bit unclear.
Right. So just to bring us back a second, they also talk about there's 5 stones, and they're trying to bring together the 5 stones. Are they mining for the stones?
A 3-minute scene where you tell me some made up mythology about these are the 5 stones of Vishnu, and they represent the 5 or 6 possibly arms of Vishnu, and that's like a thing. And legend says if they're all brought together, they will give the bearer, unlimited life or something.
But all of this you could have from the Sultan, you could have from the Maharaja, of the if it was an adult,
you could have it from the
dinner
village
table.
elder that they meet at the very beginning.
Yeah, whatever. But either way, you need it presented, don't you?
Lao She could tell them at the beginning. Anyone, please, God.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room here. That is the racism in this movie. Let's just dive in. I think we've
racism in this movie, Sam, is cartoonish. It's the sort of racism where somebody decides they want to set their movie in India and they know nothing about India. They don't know where it is on a map. They've never met an Indian person and they don't care.
Yeah.
They've written the movie and then that's what they're going to shoot. And that's why the country of India said, no, actually, I think that movie portrays our people and our culture in a negative fashion, and therefore we won't allow you to film it. That should have been maybe it's insensitive, and maybe it's informed by colonial racism. This movie,
it's so. I think the cartoonishness is why watching this as a kid, and all the adults who watched this with us as well, because it was the 90s, and I just don't think that awareness was necessarily there, and probably in the 80s it probably wasn't really there. Like, you don't really see it. I think it's so exaggerated that it almost passes. And it's not until you think, like, especially going into that village for the first time, like, oh my God, and the food and the way that and the flies on the food. And Kate Capshaw is absolutely disgusted by these people and what they're eating. And even when he says that's more than these people eat in a week, I'm like, is it? I mean,
I do think there's a way that something like that could be impactful. I found the castle stuff way more offensive, and the mine stuff.
We're not even getting
I found that to be like, in a different movie, if you're going in a different direction, then maybe that is like actually in a movie where we then talk about, well, why do these people have nothing to eat? Oh, it's because the British Empire is raping the country for every natural resource it's possibly got. Like that, then you're saying something. You're just having it because your perception is that these people are poor, hungry, the way that the movie portrays them, again, stupid, greedy. When we get to the castle, there's all these fat people in brown face slopping down eyeball soup.
God. But importantly, you're not making, you think they're poor and you think that they're, disgusting or whatever in the writing process. And you're not even willing to get the movie to do anything about that. Like, that's a thing that I think if it's so incidental to the plot. These people do not have to be there. They do not have to be this wretched. They do not have to be this poor and this living in these hovels and so desperate, because it doesn't affect the plot in any way. The only thing that is important is that their kids have been stolen, and so I think that's fine. And so when they're so desperate, it's like, well, maybe they say, oh, the crops have been destroyed or whatever, but you could make it much more impactful and say this tribe, this clan who's going out, they're destroying they're going around messing people up. Like, you could do something more impactful to show that actually, once these guys are gone,
mythology, and it's like, well, the stone's gone and prosperity's gone, and then we will return the stone, and then everything will be fine. And again, there's a magical element to these Indiana Jones movies where magic does exist. Yeah. The Ark of the Covenant we get, and the Grail stuff. Like, but the movie isn't really interested in any of that. I don't think this movie is any different if magic doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Except for the magic of plane fuel. But,
Move on. With eyeball soup, chilled monkey brains, snake surprise, the scarab beetles. This scene is unbelievable. And yet, I remember thinking this was hilarious. As a kid, I remember thinking...
Kids are all racists, just to be clear. Kids are racist as well.
I was particularly racist, it seems, because I thought this was fucking hilarious. Because it's so exaggerated. It's set up to be so extreme that you think that... the fact that there's a bit of animal cruelty here. I don't give a fuck about eels particularly, but they cut open the snake and live eels come out, and you're like... In a Hollywood movie, this shouldn't be happening. I know it's the 80s, but still, like, so much of the the racism and the insensitivity, it feels like we're watching something from the 1940s and 50s. Like, it really, really does feel like we've gone that far back, not in the mid 80s. And like, I just want your thing about, we're in India and we don't give a fuck what India's really like, and this is what we're going to present it as, is fine, but it pushes on to like active hatred at some points, doesn't it? I think this scene is particularly bad for that.
No, it's absolutely racist, and like I said, it's this systemic racism, which is that, like you said, there's loads of like colonial era like cartoons and propaganda and stories about, again, these are not my views or the views of the Imaginary Movie podcast, about native peoples and their strange and disturbing customs that upset Western, outlooks and things like that. But what you can't forget is that this movie was made by lots of grown adult men and women who should have looked at this and said, are we maybe implying that all Indians are either starving, pathetic villagers without dignity, slaves, or fat, greasy, greedy people who sit and eat monkey brains and eyeballs for fun? And it's
chilled monkey brains.
It's the way it's portrayed, and it's not. None of these people are the bad guys. That's the most shocking thing here, is that no one at this banquet, apart from the Maharaja, who isn't even a bad guy because he's brainwashed. No one. These aren't the bad guys. These aren't the ruling class who are oppressing the poor people in the countryside. These are just other guests at this dinner who are irrelevant to the movie, who don't appear again. There's no Hans Blofeld
just like
stroking a cat, and then he comes back in the final act and it turns out he's pulling all the strings. They have no connection with the bad guys.
It's just like the villagers. It's just like the villagers, isn't it? And that's the thing of like, well, it doesn't. We they don't need to be there, and so their portrayal doesn't need to be there, and thus it's purely just for fun, like, as it were, for Lucas and Spielberg to be just absolutely reveling on these.
Look at
tropes.
These disgusting people and the disgusting things they're doing,
and even the cult thing later on, and there's like the betrayal when they're all chanting, like it's. This is absolutely not my view, but I think this is how it's portrayed. Is like it's almost like swarm like, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like they feel like it's animalistic, And I think it's so racially tinged. It's not just that these people are all brainwashed; it's that they're
And then you
brown
mix it, and you
and they're
mix it with
brainwashed.
the blood and the brainwashing, and then the
Oh,
voodoo dolls later on, and it's like, what are
oh,
we doing? Who wrote this? Like, it's
yeah.
just it's just poor. It's
Right.
poorly thought out.
It's poorly thought out. Right. I want to keep us moving because we can decry this movie all day. Let's talk about the last act. Let's talk about from the point where Indy turns. I love Harrison. We haven't talked about Harrison Ford in this. I think he's fucking bringing it. He is so good in this movie. He's just excellent, and when he turns evil. I love the possessed look in his face. Like as much like Harrison Ford has that intangible something that he's able to deliver um, these lines and this performance really well. But once he becomes free and they're trying to escape, there's a good 45 minutes left of this movie. So
And
I
it's
know,
all
like,
one long chase scene where
oh,
they turn every corner. Every corner they turn. The minecart scene seemed to go on for about 3 hours. I
it's
don't know how long it
it's
actually was.
they're all about 2 hours. These movies, right? And Lucas generally goes for about 2 hours, which I think is probably about right. Most, we joke about a 90-minute movie, but actually 2 hours is probably good enough to give you a good long experience in the cinema, and it's all fine. But I think you need at least 10 minutes gone from this, probably 15 minutes gone. We can cut some of the minecart stuff. We can cut a lot
Or
of.
just break these scenes up because it's so hard. It's so hard to. It's like these Fast and Furious movies. It's so hard to keep looking at the screen when every action sequence is 48 minutes long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the minecart thing goes straight from the Indy being evil thing, which then goes straight into the running along the cliffs thing, which goes straight into the bridge thing, which is the final final action of the movie. And by the time you're on the bridge, you're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Because the
Please
bad
just
guys are
cut the
never
rope for
defeated.
me.
They
I
have
know.
all of these things, and we're just running away from bad
But
guys. And
but
then
it
the
also.
British Army appears and saves the day, and it's like, I'm sorry, I've had quite enough of white saviors in the last hour. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it's really, and I think a lot of it's because um we don't have that really good bad guy either. Like
No,
he's not really he's not any
I don't
more
really
exceptional.
care.
He
He's
falls.
poorly explained. You don't understand what he wants.
I don't think performance is like that good either. I think it's just kind of standard big wide-eyed bad guy. There's not really a lot going on there. And I think that if you cut that last act, if you get rid of 5 minutes of minecart, if we maybe have a kind of B plot almost of like Capshaw doing something, maybe she gets to have like an action scene. Maybe she gets to have a little bit where they get split up, and Indy says, like, maybe she's got to go get the stones. Maybe she has to rescue the stones, and that be the role that she plays. It would at least give us Indy's getting the shit kicked out of him, and she's trying to find the stones, and then Short Round's doing his thing, and then they
At
can work
least,
together. But
at least somebody throw a pie.
yeah, I mean, we do get some cool deaths. We get the death.
Visually, this is a very cool movie. I do think that it looks pretty good. I like a lot of the stunts and the set design. I really like the bridge scene at the end. It's stupid as sin, but I really enjoyed it. I think that
Yeah,
it's like a
it's visually amazing, isn't it? It's visually amazing, and you're not going to get anything as like that's what you're going to get in a movie like this with this budget and all that. Like, so it's almost yeah. I'm not going to give you points for it, movie. Like this, you
exactly.
just do what you're supposed to do, which is give us good sets and all that stuff. So
Yeah, and it's kind of the tragedy. And again, going back to it, it's the tragedy of this movie that yes, George Lucas is a racist piece of shit, and that is absolutely fact. Watch any of his movies.
I don't know. What are you saying that? Are you saying that George Lucas could like find racism in his characters in the voids of space? Yeah,
I'm saying that George Lucas
the
could invent
Moidians.
a galactic trade federation and then somehow make these green aliens a racist Chinese stereotype. Somehow.
Well, to me, it's a combination of of Asian racism and a bit of anti-Semitism as well in there, which I think is just charming.
Oh yeah,
Just charming
yeah.
in those. In that.
But regardless of George Lucas's racism, regardless of Steven Spielberg's daddy issues and girlfriend issues, again, refer to our back catalogue. We've talked a lot about Spielberg's daddy issues.
Spielberg.
Regardless of that, the two of them have made some astounding, influential movies. Spielberg, especially, is a really good director. He's made a lot of really good movies. Like some of the best movies of the 1980s were directed by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
And you kind of see that in bits of this movie where you can see that they had certain stunts they wanted to do, and they really work. But unfortunately, you just need somebody like with the prequels. The prequels are a great example of like George Lucas having his hand at the wheel and everything going wrong. You need an adult in the room to be like, George, that's great. I really love your enthusiasm. I really love all your ideas. But do you not think we're going to offend the entire nation of China with these aliens? And that makes
George, listen to me.
Do you not think that India saying we can't film there because of the racism in our movie is maybe a wake-up call to try and address the racism in our movie? Again, you just need somebody like Kasdan to be like, to rein in some of the more extreme views of these two people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm gonna, you know what?
Because they can do it. They did Raiders. Raiders was great. They did Last Crusade. Last Crusade is great. Last Crusade is the antidote to this movie.
I know. I'm gonna have to watch it very soon just to get this movie out of my system. But I'm for me, right? Because it's one of the ones I hadn't seen in many years. Because it's one of the ones that I enjoyed as a kid. Like going back and watching it now, as much as it's abhorrent, but like there's also just this absolute disappointment. I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in you, George and Stephen. Like, how could you do this to me? Because I really liked it. I thought I liked this movie. I thought this was a movie that was going to be like, oh yeah, it's a bit bad, but this like you kind of.
I tried to tell you, Sam. I tried to warn you, Sam.
I know you did.
I told you.
I know you did. And the first 13 minutes are exquisite. It's so fun and perfect and a laugh.
It feels like we were robbed of a good Indiana Jones adventure that happened directly before the plot of this movie. And it's a real shame. And so many of the pieces are good. I think Kate Capshaw's good generally. I liked her in this movie.
With what she's got.
I just found myself wishing she had something to do. I think the chemistry with Harrison Ford is good. I think her chemistry with Short and Round is good. I think maybe have her scream 45% less. But like ultimately, I think the cast is good. And obviously they can make a fucking movie. But they just, let's just turn another one of these out and it's fine. Sequels are never very good.
Fuck it. Fuck you. You'll watch it. Yeah. It's very disappointing.
You'll watch it.
It's very disappointing.
Never again. I think this is the last time for me. I think this is the last go round.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I was speaking to Nicola about this, and she says, "Oh, do you think Callum? You're going to show them to Callum?" I was like, "I'm going to start with Last Crusade, and when he's a little bit older, I'm showing Raiders, and then I'll just say, well, you can watch."
And they never made any more, Callum.
Yeah, because interestingly though, we are getting to we're going to have some kind of an extra data point to first one good, second one crap, third one good, fourth one crap. The fifth one is just about to come out.
Also crap, seemingly.
I mean, I'm going to watch it before I make a judgment, but you're probably right. That's sometimes the case.
There are some good signs. It's
going to be shit because you know what? These movies and these characters are self-contained in so many ways. The only additional data point, it's not quite a full movie, but the Young Indiana Jones TV series.
Never saw it.
Have you? It must be on YouTube. It must. I can't imagine it's anywhere.
I can find
it. You know what? I remember it being great. Basically, Indiana Jones just tore around with all of these 19th century figures, like Teddy Roosevelt and stuff. I remember it being great. I also remember Temple Doom being great as well. So maybe don't trust my opinion on this.
Yeah, well, maybe put a pin in that, Sam. But I do have more or less unlimited time. So
yeah. Well, I look forward to watching. Maybe we could do some Indiana Jones, further Indiana Jones. I want to watch Last Crusade, like almost immediately.
Previous episode, by the way. Last Crusade.
Oh, did we do it already?
We did a commentary in 2021.
Wow. That is a long time ago. Well, until then... we can go back and watch those movies, and until then...
And much like at the end of Raiders, Sam and I are turning to dust just from the passage of time.
I know. It's horrific.
Don't watch this movie, please. Save yourself. Go!
Movie.
Go! Run!